Effectively using evidence in English essays. Now, some general advice first of all. You should always support your claims about the text or its context with evidence. So, this should be quotations as much as possible, but it can also be paraphrasing, and don't forget citations or in-text referencing for both of these. You need to analyze or explain the significance of the quotation, of the example you're putting in. Don't expect the quote to do the arguing for you. You can't just plonk it in there and leave it on its own. Now, this analysis that you do, it's about explaining the significance of the evidence in relation to the question, in relation to your thesis and or the supporting argument of that paragraph. Analysis of a quotation is not paraphrasing or rephrasing the quotation. Some students, particularly when they're dealing with older styles of English, for example, if they're writing about a Shakespearean play, fall into the trap of just translating the Elizabethan English into modern English. That's not analysis. You should use different pieces of evidence to support different claims or subtopics. Don't use the same pieces of evidence in different body paragraphs. This is to help you demonstrate wide reading, wide research, that you understand and have thought about the text in different ways. Quotations should be introduced in some manner, and then you need to transition the reader smoothly to the analysis. Okay, you should always try to fluidly integrate your evidence. So it's nicer to read, it's easier to read, and it's easier for the reader to follow your argument. When you're including examples and evidence, you should reproduce all features exactly as they appear in the source in regards to spelling, layout, and so on. You can use ellipses and alter grammar in square brackets if necessary to make the quote's grammar fit with the rest of the sentence, and differentiate narration from dialogue with single and double quotation marks. And we will have a look at examples of some of these later in the video. The quotations you choose should be as short as possible, so be discerning with what you choose. You quote only what you have to in order to prove your point. The marker doesn't want to reread big chunks of the text. It's your voice, your argument that the marker wants to read. Now, transitioning into the quotation, how to make this fluid and smooth. You've got a few things that you can do. Option 1 is to provide some context, some information about where in the narrative that particular piece of evidence is found. It lets the reader get their head around what you're talking about and where that happened. Some examples. When Lady Bracknell re-enters and interrupts Jack's proposal to her daughter, she exclaims, "Mr. Worthing, rise from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous." So we have a sense of when this happens in the play. When Carmel confronts Claire about viewing the girl's body, Claire highlights the moral problem underpinning their conflict when she asks, "Who are we?" And it is after the riot at the hospital when Mustafa Mond questions John and articulates what drives this society. For example, we don't want people to be attracted to old things. We want them to like the new ones. Option 2 for transitioning into the quotation is to make an assertion or some analysis of your own, because remember, you can change the order of the example and the analysis in your paragraph. Then put in a colon and then the quote. For example, Vivian hates the knights for scorning her, and she dreams of achieving glory by destroying Merlins, colon, I have made this glory mine. Fitzgerald gives Nick a muted tribute to the hero, colon, Gatsby turned out all right in the end. And Cassio represents not only a political but also a personal threat to Iago, colon, he hath a daily beauty in his life that makes me ugly. So you can use your analysis to transition into your quotation or your evidence. Your third option for transitioning into your quotation is to make an assertion of your own, but work the quoted material into what you're saying and into your analysis. So, for Nick, who remarks that Gatsby turned out all right, the hero deserves respect but perhaps does not inspire great admiration. So, we can read this student's discussion or argument, but they have used the quoted material to get their point across. Satan's motion is many things. He rides through the air, rattles, later explodes, and wanders and hovers like a fire. So this student has made an assertion about something and then is pulling these different quotations together in a bit of a list. And Mrs. Higgins reveals that her son offends all her friends. They stop coming whenever they meet him. He fidgets and cannot keep still and can't be bothered with the prospect of marriage. So what we have here is a description of what Mrs. Higgins thinks of her son, with a combination of the reader's interpretation, but also some quotations to really support those claims. Now, when you need to transition out of the quotation, because you can't just end your paragraph there, and you really shouldn't go straight onto your summary sentence from there. Often students write something like, this quote shows that, ugh, very cliched. You should avoid doing that as much as possible. Teachers get really sick of reading that. It doesn't demonstrate particularly sophisticated control of language. So what you can do instead is be more specific with your vocabulary. After their first proper encounter, Rosemary describes her to Guy as the nosiest person, but goes on to say that it's kind of funny and forgivable. These excerpts exemplify Minnie's personality, which is unwavering throughout the text and produces a consistent tone of humour. So be very specific about what the language is in the quotation and what they do, rather than just saying they do this. To transition out, you can also make a statement about what the author was doing in that excerpt, what they were aiming to achieve. So, for example, the description of the skies of Chiba communicates this gloomy atmosphere in the opening sentence. The sky above the port was the colour of a television, tuned to a dead channel. Gibson uses the metaphor to establish the ambience of Chiba as a mass of disorder and confusion, and also foreshadow the life of the protagonist, Case. Another example, Krakauer describes McCandless as being stirred by the austerity of this landscape, by its saline beauty. The desert sharpened the sweet ache of his longing, amplified it, gave shape to it in seared geology and clean slant of light. However, there is no actual evidence for this. Krakauer made assumptions based on his own experiences in that place and imagined what it would have been like for McCandless. He writes McCandless as an active participant in the setting, creating verisimilitude and so empathy in the reader. When a quote articulates an idea exactly, state its significance in regards to character, theme, or effect on the audience to prevent you from just rewording something that doesn't need rewording. Julia explains that when you make love, you're using up energy, and afterwards you feel happy and don't give a damn about anything. The party can't bear you feel like that. But Winston does not allow the party to deprive him of love towards other human beings, and he recognizes the value in intimacy and human relationships. So here we have a quote from a character, Julia, from 1984. Her explanation of why things are the way they are in relation to human relationships, okay? It doesn't need rewording. Julia explains it for Winston, but also for the reader. But then to transition out of this evidence, this student has made a connection to the theme in general, okay? What another character does because of these circumstances in which they find themselves. Another example, Rowdy's acceptance of Arnold's dual identity can be seen in his comments, "You're the nomadic one," and "You looked happy, and I was happy for you." This foreshadows the future actions of others. If someone as easily angered as Rowdy can embrace Arnold's complex identity, then so can the most traditional and narrow minded on the reservation. Okay. These quotes from this character of Rowdy don't really need further explanation. They're pretty straightforward. Okay. But what's the significance of those? They foreshadow. Okay. There's a link to a wider theme here about acceptance.